mean, I feel like someone had this question, so let me ask this question, which is about investing. You said somewhere, apparently, that most people are going to be investors in the future, especially when full-scale AGI kicks in. That seems like maybe not something you'd say exactly, but
That's something
hi.
a Balaji said, actually. It's a Balaji quote.
Hmm.
And I'm not Balaji, but I think I know what he meant. He's basically saying we're going from an economy where most people are labor to where most people are capital. We're going from most people being workers to most people being investors. This trend started with a 401k. Crypto makes it even easier. And crypto is like this giant casino in which you can invest in stocks, bonds, derivatives, options, all this venture, new blockchains, new protocols, stuff that was traditionally closed off and only accredited sophisticated investors, and now everyone can invest in it. So it's sort of creating this mentality of everyone's an investor owner, which is a good thing, right? Everyone's a laborer and everyone's a capitalist. And ideally, I think the highest form beyond laborer and beyond capitalist is creator. Everyone's a creator. Everyone's either creating product or they're creating code or they're creating media, they're creating ideas, they're creating books, they're creating podcasts, they're creating YouTube, they're creating Twitch, what have you. But the creator economy, in that sense, is the apotheosis, it's the highest level. Above the labor economy, above the capitalist economy, is the creator economy.
Yeah, I mean, I think even crowdfunding kind of fits into that, right? Like it's taking that idea of like DeFi. Like basically I have 7,300 investors putting in $5 million instead of a single investor putting in $5 million.
Yeah,
It's
you've
sort of
got your
that
fans
decentralized
invested in your
aspect.
business. Yeah, you have your fans invested in your business, which is great. These people are gonna in fact, if you go onto Twitter, you'll see how people who invest in crypto apps just like promote them nonstop. So now you're gonna have 7,300 true fans who are gonna be out there promoting Gumroad nonstop, and that is a formidable army. And I think, for example, if you look at Tesla, Tesla is partially the most valuable company in the world because Tesla's car owners are also shareholders and true believers in the product, and they just really, really push it. They are that intolerant minority that works for Tesla instead of against, which is how most intolerant minorities tend to work.
Yeah, it's funny. When I started considering doing this crowdfunding round, one of the like some of the feedback from the industry was like, don't like, isn't that like, do you want more investors? Like, why would you want more investors? And this is kind of what people would say about the party round, right? Like, why do
My
you
my
want 10
general rule in
investors?
venture capital is if the venture capital industry by and large hates it, you should do it.
And I'm like, yeah, well, are you asking why I want more people in my army than fewer? I don't get it. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's basically, I think Parker Thompson had this great tweet a while back where he said, every investor who invested before me, sorry, every investor who invests after me is a spreadsheet jockey, and every investor who invested before me is a dart throwing monkey. And it's just the nature of investors that they look at people who are sort of like earlier than them or smaller than them, and they think, these are just dart throwing monkeys. They don't know what they're doing. And anyone who comes in afterwards and is more rigorous, they're like, these are just Wall Street bankers with their spreadsheets. They don't know what they're doing. And you can kind of hear this complaint in the venture business a lot. Another thing you see a lot in the venture business is people saying, oh, welcome to venture so and so. You're going to learn the hard way that blah, 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 right? VCs hate competition because they're selling a commodity product. Money is the ultimate commodity. It's branded by the Federal Reserve, right? Your brand doesn't matter. And so they have the hardest sales job in the world. They have to brand money. So much of it is about status and signaling and condescension and, positioning and know-how and like appearing like you're in the right class. So VCs have developed a black art in sort of creating signaling and transferring status onto companies. And you kind of have to see through that as an entrepreneur. And if you can see through that as an entrepreneur, you can actually get great bargains. Obviously, if you see through it incorrectly and you end up with like people in your cap table who screw you over, then you may be in trouble. You may have done a bad job. But in modern fundraising, good entrepreneurs retain control of their companies, so they don't really have to worry about that. In fact, I would argue these days it's investors who get taken advantage of much more than entrepreneurs do, unlike 20 years ago when it was mostly investors taking advantage of entrepreneurs.
Well, do you think crowdfunding will take off? Like, do you think this is a trend that will this become the default, or will this just become like just more competition for VCs that will encourage, like music labels are still around, book publishers are still around. They clearly like do something, right?
Yeah, well, crowdfunding is highly, highly regulated, and because it's so regulated, it's limited. It's 5 million bucks, no more than $10,000 a person. You have to publish 2 years of financials. You have some liability. Like, it's just really hard to pull off. So you're not unique as a company that can do it, but you're in a limited set of companies that is willing to go through the hassle of doing it today. And I think more and more companies will open up to do it, for their one true fans. But the where the real competition is coming from is crypto. The largest angel investor base is in crypto. The largest funding base is in crypto. The market cap of crypto altogether is approaching $2 trillion. That's a lot of wealth sloshing around. There's a lot of people who recently made money in crypto that only understand crypto and they're happy to invest $100 in some DeFi protocol that's not even launched when they wouldn't even know where to start with a YC company that's raising $2 million. So I think the real competition for venture is actually happening in crypto. There's a lot more money sloshing around than in crowdfunding. Crowdfunding will happen and there will be more and more and more of it. But because of the artificial regulatory apparatus that's slapped onto it for user protection, quote unquote, it's going to be much more limited in size. Because crypto is resistant to the sovereign nation state, because it kind of routes around and operates, in the gray markets, it just ends up being, even though it's crazier and frothier, it ends up being a much larger market.
Is it just because it's impossible to actually regulate? It's impossible in
It's very
in that
difficult to
system,
regulate without
or too
destroying it.
expensive?
Well,
Hmm.
it's difficult to regulate it without scaring it overseas or destroying it locally. And if you do that, then you pass up on the fruits of it, and the fruits of it are very tantalizing.
Yeah, I feel like crypto in 2011, 2012 like had this market risk of like it could have been stopped, I think. But I think it got to scale, and now nations are sort of it's at a shelling point where no nation is going to, it's kind of bigger than any nation at this point.
Yeah, it's like capitalism or technology. Like you can definitely squish it in your country, but it will cost you a lot and it will just go somewhere else.
Do you think it's as fundamental as that, right? Where it is sort of an inevitability over time as humans
Yeah,
get
it's sort
smarter.
of,
Like this was a
you know,
part of our evolution in a sense.
yeah, it's hard to glibly describe crypto, but I think at one level what it does is it replaces networks with markets. And so in a lot of places where we had networks of abundance, where we didn't know how to govern the abundance, and we had to do it with having a dictator or a king or a sovereign or a corporation or Mark Zuckerberg or Jack Dorsey in charge. Um, now we have a way to do that with a distributed network where the users are in charge and there's a free market within the users to determine how the resources get allocated. And that's a very, very fundamental shift. If you can build a Clubhouse or a Twitter or a Facebook or sovereign money or gold or Wall Street or a Spotify like network, and you can do it so it's run by its users, that is going to be a fundamental innovation on infrastructure and governance, and it'll change the way that our society is structured. It's very powerful. It's very next generational. So you could forego that, but then you're kind of stuck in the old model of organization. It's like being stuck in, some form of communism or socialism when the rest of the world is moving to capitalism, or it's being stuck in some kind of a wall garden internet when the rest of the world is moving to an open internet. So I think the difference will just become more and more stark over time.
Yeah, it's like I feel like the internet didn't really do anything to the way that we work yet. Like we still work in these 9 to 5s. We were still going to these offices, like not too different from the industrial age or era. And I feel like crypto and the creator economy, like that's finally happening. Like we just had to get on ramp to the internet. We just kind of took everything we were doing offline online. And then the next phase is like, cool, now that we're all online, like actually a lot of these assumptions we don't need anymore. And
Yeah,
crypto is kind of the
I forget who said it. Like the future's already here. It's just unevenly distributed. Like it's very unevenly distributed. Like the first phase of the internet, you had the web, or even if I go further back, like there was a time when VCs only used to invest in hardware companies, right? IBM and Digital Electric Corporation and Sun Microsystems. And the idea of investing in software is ludicrous. Software, this thing has no value. You can copy it. I can't even see it. How can you sell it? So investing in a Microsoft was like a daring act. And then, of course, when software got normalized, people realized all the values in software. Then it became about, well, you can't invest in the web. You can't invest in Yahoo. That's a website. You got to invest in software. But then it turned out that Yahoo and Google were really valuable. So the next thing comes along, people are like, well, what about this crypto? Well, there's nothing there. There's not even software. There's not even a website. It's not owned by anyone. There's nothing there. It's just a hallucination. How can you invest in the idea of a new thing called money? And then people got rich in crypto. And now the new one's coming along with NFTs. Like that's art? That's not art. That's just a signature. That's just a That's just a hash that you own in the blockchain. That's not even a piece of art. How can you invest in that? And honestly, I'm even a little lost in that last one. But it just shows you how much more ephemeral this idea of value is getting and how each generation has to make a mental leap past the last one into where the value is coalescing.
I think part of it is that like the next generation sees the sort of shared social myths that create the value, and like the last generation doesn't. So we look at this and we don't get it because we don't see any of the activity. We don't see any of the millions of people agreeing that this thing is interesting and that enables, whatever interesting behavior.
That's right. The art on the wall only has value if other people who look at it think it has value. The same way Bitcoin only has value to the extent that other people out there are Bitcoiners and think and will accept it in exchange for material things and physical things in the world that we all agree has value.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we plan to open source Gumroad completely, and it's because like the code of Gumroad should not really be valuable. That's not why
Yeah.
Gumroad will
Another
be
way of
will be
looking,
big.
yeah, another way of looking at crypto is it's the business model for open source. Open source was this incredibly powerful force that upended the entire back-end infrastructure in the software domain, but never had a business model that was done purely through this is free, this is abundant, go and spread this. But now we've added a business model to open source, and that's tokens. And so now we're getting the open source revolution with all of its open APIs and composability and hackability, and how people can just build on top of each other like Lego blocks. But now we've also attached business models to the whole thing, while still miraculously somehow making it so that not a single person is in charge of the whole thing.
Do you think there's a way to port? Like my goal is, one of the reasons Gumroad I've tried to maintain as a sort of tiny size of the firm, a one person company effectively, is sort of like allows me that ability to kind of like centralize, like I'm the single point of failure, and I could at some point, my hope is that I would be able to decentralize myself effectively. And then, and I can do that because I'm me. I can, I can choose what to do with my sovereignty. Um, is there or no? I have like there basically has to be a totally new organization that has to be built sort of from first principles in this new universe.
Yeah, my guess is it'll have to be a new organization first principles. Crypto is so weird. You have to like build with wallets and private keys and tokens and the cryptography and the curves, and it's just so complicated. It's like, you're building with Legos and they're playing Minecraft over there. It's literally a different game. I think by the time you may end up starting a second company. And by the way, this is kind of what I did with AngelList, right? AngelList was started as a mailing list for angel investors, and then we built AngelList Venture, which was almost a completely different thing, which is sort of this back end for firms and syndicates and rolling funds. And then we spun out CoinList, which did crypto, and then we spun out AngelList Talent that did talent. But trying to build everything under one roof is really hard. So every single one of these was a new creative act within the company that then got spun out with its own leadership, its own cap table, and that's hard to do. So my guess is that it's very hard to move an organization, not just because of uh, the people infrastructure, which is what you're finessing, but I think also because of just the design of the application. That said, Gumroad is a very, very thin thing, right? It's closer to a protocol than most applications are. So it's possible that you might be able to turn it into a protocol, but I think it's just equally likely that you're going to see this jumbled mass of things out there in crypto land that don't really make any sense to you. And then one morning you're going to woke up and they'll have coalesced in some kind of a decentralized Gumroad. But look, what actually protects you, and you're not going to love this, is regulations. You're operating in the fiat currency domain, so someone has to handle credit cards and wire transfers, and like the normal payment infrastructure and mechanism, and that's not going to go into crypto. Crypto is incompatible with the legacy financial system. It can interface at some key points, and those key points can end up being incredibly valuable, like Coinbase is going to go public for between 50 and $100 billion, being worth more than most of the banks. But those interface points are still kind of on the edges of where crypto operates. Crypto wants to operate in an all digital, on chain, all crypto domain.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, I think that the amount of code in these universes, like what they are actually doing, what problems they're solving are very, very, very different, right? Like in crypto, I assume it's mostly around the decentralization of and making sure that these things actually, it's just like codifying all of these things, making these things composable, I assume is very, 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 very difficult. Like functional programming to someone, someone who hasn't done it before, it's going to look very weird. And most of the code that is written in this universe, like most of the code that we write at Gumroad is basically like fraud detection of various degrees, right? It's just basically almost everything we build is just bad actor prevention, right? Like it's just we can't trust the people who use Gumroad enough, so we have to build passwords and two-factor authentication and payments and risk and fraud and chargebacks, and we have to protect against database manipulation and authentication and all, like just so many, almost all of the code is basically preventing that from happening. Whereas in crypto, that almost isn't an issue, right? Like it's sort of assumed that when you enter this world, everyone has sort of done that already, and you enter this new world and sort of trust. It's sort of trustless in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, one of the assumptions that crypto violates is you remember, like in the old days, we would look at passwords and be like, well, passwords are horrible. Users should not have to manage passwords. Let's figure out how to get users to not manage passwords because they're the worst, right? Instead, it turns out the answer is let's let them manage private keys, which is irrevocable bearer wallets. That is 1,000 times more difficult. But it turns out if you can get a user base that can not only just manage passwords, that can manage private keys and wallets, then you can really secure the data in such a way that you can sort of then focus on other things. You don't have to worry about all the issues that you spend building on Gumroad, because in crypto land, every user controls their own wallet, they control their own data.